This video was made possible by EA Game Changers.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
Here we go then. This is your very first look at some F1 2021 gameplay. Big shout out once again to Codemasters and EA for giving me the opportunity to play this early build. And well, this video is going to be actually quite a raw video. I just wanted to show you some relatively raw kind of gameplay of the video, just to see what you're going to get when you actually just drive the car. I'm not going to go into too much of the detail of the new kind of features and stuff of the new game. That'll be in future videos. I am able to make 3 videos from this build. So there'll be 2 more videos after this one. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to catch those videos coming up very soon. And what you're seeing right in front of you here is just the raw menus as we've got it in this build. I will say this is obviously quite an early build, the work in progress at the top there, so any glitches that you may see, of course, are probably just down to the nature of an early build. But that's the raw menu that we've got it as it is. So they've overhauled that. I'll talk about that a bit more in another video. And that was your load time. So obviously this is going to be on next gen and it's going to be on PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. My computer runs a SSD, so I assume the loading times will be quite similar. So it's going to take you only a couple of seconds to get into the car. And here we go then. This is your very first look at some F1 2021 gameplay. I hope you're excited as I am. When I very first got this build and they sent it to me, I was really excited to get out on track and just to play it. You know, before I was able to get these awesome opportunities, I was very much the person that was searching for, F1 gameplay back in the day, back in 2012, before I even started my channel. F1 2012 gameplay, just give me some gameplay of the new game, and here it is. And the first thing you'll notice then is the on-screen display has actually changed quite a bit. They've gone for a bit more of a kind of official F1 feel, you'll notice. There's a few bits they've kind of moved around, like the curved edges and stuff to some of the boxes. And of course, the bit at the bottom, actually though, the data is exactly the same. They've not added or removed any data as far as I can tell. They've just kind of reordered it, and I prefer it. I think having the shift indicator at the bottom there is really, really nice, and I think it's a positive change. The other thing you'll probably notice is the graphics have definitely taken a step up. As we flip here between F1 2020 and F1 2021, you'll notice there's quite a few changes. I mean, to me, the colours straight away are a bit more realistic. They're not so kind of vibrant in your face, particularly the kind of AstroTurf off the track and that sort of thing. They're just not so in your face. I'm using the Red Bull because I thought the livery would be quite similar, but actually, if you look at it, although the livery is similar year to year in real life, it's actually quite different in the game. They've been able to do the matte effect much better. You'll see the off-track, it's the grass here, say, it's actually some 3D grass on the right. You'll also notice in the distance there's a bit of haze on 2020, but they've removed that haze a bit more on 2021, probably just because they've got a bit more confidence in the graphics. They don't need to kind of blur out the distant vision. They're happy for you to see that kind of stuff just because the graphics are a bit better. And of course, the textures are also a little bit higher just because it's going to be a new gen console. So, all these, particularly on the grid here, all these track details are much more clear and precise than they were before. I will say there's no motion blur in this build. So, things like your peripheral vision there, it's going to look much sharper because there's no motion blur. So do take that part with a pinch of salt. But anyway, then, let's get into this race. We're going to be doing a race as Max Verstappen around Spa. It's a classic circuit. I want us to do this circuit just because I thought, it's one that most people enjoy, let's be honest. As Max Verstappen, this is the new starting grid procedure then, so you can see quite similar to before. They just kind of tweaked it again. It feels a lot more like the official F1 almost said the official F1 game, the official F1 broadcast, I suppose. Real life F1 broadcast is the word I'm likely looking for. Here we go then. Getting a launch off the grid. The start lights at the top there have changed very slightly. You can see my frowny, I'm serious driving face on the left there, and having quite a cautious start. And well, in this race, look out for the AI, the tweaks to the AI, and also the handling. I'll get into the handling in just a little while, but from this first lap at least, let's just concentrate on the AI. You saw that they were a little bit more aggressive on the start. There wasn't really much room for me. I kind of backed out. I was being a little bit cautious. They did feel a little bit more aggressive. And you see here, using some overtake ERS, you can see in the bottom left as it glows green there. That's what I'm trying to use full power deployment. Also, the right hand side there, you can see we are locked to standard fuel mode. That is, of course, a F1 tweak, so real life F1 has that as well. During the race and qualifying, they're not allowed to change their fuel modes except for in safety cars, which is also in the game. So you are completely locked to standard now, but other than that, we're pretty much the same as last year. We've got the overtake button. Just trying to go on the outside here of Carlos Sainz. I will say as well, I'm running 100 AI difficulty in this. They definitely seem faster. Now, obviously it's early days. I have done about 5 hours on this game. but it's still, I'm still very much lacking some practice. I'm sure I could find some time with a bit more time on the game. I'm running a standard setup as well, but in previous games with a standard setup, I was on about 105 AI. With this, I was really struggling with that. I'm in a Red Bull. It's not exactly a slow car. I will say as well, I don't think the car performance is completely final. I feel like the Red Bulls are perhaps a little bit slow in a straight line. But just see here, we're just going to understeer here, off onto the curb, and look at that. Look how heavily that mistake was punished. We ran a little bit wide, got onto the curb, and the new handling, which I'll get into in just a moment, completely punished us. I mean, we didn't go that wide. We just sort of touched the curb, but we lost downforce and we spun into the wall. As you see our first flashback there. And I will say as well, shout out to David Greco, who's the handling designer on these F1 games. Me and him had quite a long conversation actually about all the changes that he's made within the handling. And there's two major changes. The handling's been tweaked in lots and lots of ways. It's an evolution rather than a revolution. But there's two major things that have been changed. First of all is the addition of floor downforce. So previously most of the downforce sort of came from the wings, but now the game actually calculates downforce from the floor. So in real life they have that, of course. I don't know what percentage, but a decent percentage of their downforce comes from the floor of the car, not just all from the upper wing surfaces of the car, and that is now in the game. So that's partly what you saw there as we went over the curb, is that we just got robbed of some downforce. We just weren't able the rear end wasn't able to stick to the track anymore because we went over the curb. We probably changed the ride height, changed kind of the parameters at the back of the car, and just lost downforce. I love this change. I think it's a lot more realistic. It makes you a lot more connected to the car rather than just kind of driving the car and not really worrying about what surfaces you're going over and stuff like you did previously. You now have to be really mindful. Some curbs you're able to take no problem. Other curbs you do really have to either avoid them or certainly be a lot more cautious when you're going over them, because you have to think, well, hey, if I go over that curb, I'm going to lose a good chunk of downforce, so I need to be mindful of that happening. And as you can see there, if you make a minor mistake, it can be punished a lot more heavily because, it wasn't just a minor mistake of, oh, I've run a meter wide, who cares? It was, I've run a meter wide, that's going to rob me of my rear downforce, and then I'm going to have a spin for it because the car was still loaded up through the corners. The other big change, speaking of load, is lateral load on the tyres has been basically completely revised. So basically now, the lateral load builds up in a much more natural, much more realistic way. So within the tyres, lateral load is obviously when you're cornering, is how much grip the tyre gives you in a sideways motions, I suppose. So it's effectively how much cornering grip you have is the lateral load within tyre. So with this year's game, that load builds up with downforce. Makes sense. If you've got no downforce, realistically, the tyre can't give you that much lateral grip. It just can't let you turn that quickly. If you add a whole load of downforce to the car, then the car can turn, the tyres can build up that lateral grip more and allow you to turn faster. So just like with downforce, effectively the tyre grip now builds up with you. So as you build with confidence, and I've definitely felt that with this handling model, as you build with confidence throughout the game, throughout the corners, pushing more and more, taking more and more speed, braking later and later, you get more and more grip. However, there is now a peak grip. So there's very much a curve there where you get a peak grip, and if you go beyond that peak grip, you're now punished. I think previously when you went past that peak grip, you didn't really have too much of a punishment, if you like. You kind of got similar levels of grip. But now if you go past that peak grip, let's say you have a slide, let's say like I did a minute ago, you smash into a curb, you really suffer from that because suddenly the tyre is over the peak grip. So before, if it was giving you 100% grip, once you go past that peak grip, okay, now the tyre's only going to give me, I don't know, I'm making it up, but 70% of its grip. So not only have I just lost over that curb, lost a load of downforce, but also I've lost some tyre grip because I haven't got the downforce. The tyre can then no longer handle the load either, so then the tyre loses grip. So it's kind of a bit of a double whammy. Those two very much work in tandem, and throughout various tracks, various corners, various curbs, all of the infinite possibilities that you get around the 20-odd circuits that we've got in this game, it's really varied. And some corners you're able to take, the curb and deal with the loss of downforce. Other corners you're not. Some corners, for example, traction zone. I found traction to be a lot more linear now. Traction feels really natural to get on the power. It just feels right. It just feels a bit more, I guess, logical compared to last year's game. And I'm able to get on the power nice and smoothly, and I'm able to avoid kind of spinning on traction a bit more, just because it feels a bit more natural, and I believe that's down to the revised tyre wear or tyre physics, I should say. There's been a few other smaller changes as well. Off-track surfaces like this curb on the left-hand side here, they've been increased in grip. So previously, any off-track surface, as soon as you cross the white line, essentially, that includes tarmac, that includes curbs, the grip was a bit low realistically, so that's been increased this year. So you're able to use, particularly at street circuits where you are often going across the white line, you're able to use a bit more of the off track, which is a bit more realistic. Also, the car setups, they should just make a bit of a bigger difference now. I think car setups should be a bit more dynamic. In part because of those previous changes, of course. Again, track to track, corner to corner, you'll need to set the car up to be able to handle certain curbs. Bear in mind that you're going to lose a load of downforce over the curb if you choose to take that line. Or you could set the car up differently, be a bit more stable perhaps, but then you'd have to avoid the curb and effectively take a slightly worse racing line. So the car setups are going to be a bit more dynamic this year, a bit more interesting. You'll also see there in the bottom right, I'm running 57% brake bias. Previously, you just always ran 50%. Last year, I think there was, I'm not going to say glitch, but last year, I think, you were just always running 50. It wasn't quite right. But now, I felt comfortable on 57. A few people, including David Greco, the handling designer, feels most comfortable on 56. But if you put any lower than that, you are going to get some rear locking. So rear locking is very much a thing in this game once again, just because the brake bias has been tweaked. But that is the kind of summary of the handling changes that David's made and the team has made for this year. And for me, overall, it does feel a lot better. It's an evolution rather than a revolution. It's not a night and day change, but actually it does affect how you drive the car quite a lot. Again, the downforce and tyre changes, it really does change some of your lines, and it certainly changes how cautious you are. Rather than just thinking, oh, I'm going to go wide, doesn't matter. Now it does matter. It really does matter. You really do have to drive it differently. So I just feel a bit more connected to the car now. It feels a bit more dynamic, the handling, and certainly a big change. Another change that you may have noticed is the damage model has now been revised, and it's basically been expanded and improved. You've seen a few times I've got some damage in this race that I've just immediately flashed back from, because I kind of wanted to keep a undamaged car in order to be able to show you kind of fighting through the field a little bit. But yes, the damage model has been improved quite a lot. There's now lots and lots of different areas around the car that can be damaged. You can get floor damage now, you can get side pod damage now, you can get rear wing damage now. Previously, you could only get damage to your tyres, so punctures, and then obviously you could completely take off a wheel if you smash into a wall, and then front wing. The rear wing could be damaged, but if it got damaged, you were just out of the race. That was it, and it took quite a big hit. So they've expanded it quite a lot. So you've got all those areas that can be damaged, and all those areas can affect downforce. They can also affect drag, and they can also affect effectively coolant. If you damage a side pod, you effectively get coolant loss, and your engine temperatures start rising and rising and rising. I did find it was kind of not tricky, I don't know. Obviously in my test I was trying to damage the side pod. Perhaps it's a bit easier in real racing conditions. I was on simulation damage, by the way, but it wasn't that easy to damage. Same with the rear wing, but you certainly felt the effects. I mean, I was having crazy amounts of drag at Baku. I don't think I could get above 180 miles an hour. It was ridiculous. It was so much drag when I had a lot of damage. Same with the rear wing. The rear wing was the rear end was really twitchy when I had some rear wing damage. And also there's a whole new puncture system. So previously I think you could only get one puncture at a time. Now you can get, I think it's 2 punctures at a time, which is an improvement. Also the visuals have been completely overhauled for the puncture system. So you can now actually, it just looks a bit more realistic. The tyres don't delaminate at all, so they will never kind of come apart like you sometimes see in real life when you get a carcass flying across the track. That doesn't happen. But before that point, it does look a lot more realistic. I feel like it handles a bit more realistic as well. And yeah, just a solid improvement really there to the puncture system. I also feel like it's slightly easier to get a puncture now from contact. A few other minor details then as we come to the end of this race. Collisions can now be turned off in offline races, interestingly, so it could be helpful perhaps for league racing practice or for esports level, or if you just don't want to battle other cars. If you just want to drive a race, you now can with effectively ghosting mode, collisions off. And safety cars have been tweaked. You saw a little bit earlier in the video. We didn't actually get a safety car until the cars actually approached it. So a car retired, but it didn't throw a safety car immediately. They kind of waited for the cars to get to that point. Then once the cars kind of got to that sector, then they suddenly went, right, let's throw a safety car, which is a bit more realistic. Depending on how bad the crash is, a lot of time a safety car doesn't get thrown straight away. A lot of time they wait a little bit to see what kind of carnage it's going to cause. But anyway then, as we come to the end of that race, hopefully you enjoyed this video, guys. As I said, I've got 2 more videos coming on F1 2021 on this build coming up. So do subscribe to the channel to have those. I've got one on features and another little interesting video that'll be coming up that I can kind of tell you as much as I'm able to. They've told us quite a bit about this game. So do subscribe to the channel, ready for that one. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, guys, and hopefully we're going to enjoy some F1 2021 together. Overall, overall, I would say it is a big step up. I very much enjoy the handling this year. I enjoy the game this year. I think they've improved it in quite a lot of ways. Graphically as well, it looks beautiful. I think if any of you there are lucky enough to have a next-gen console, you're going to love this game. It looks so good. It loads so fast. It feels great to drive. Really, really, really good job by them on this year's game. But anyway, that's enough then on the kind of raw gameplay of F1 2021. As I said, more videos coming up. So do subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.